So this is a desk version of a talk I gave at Copenhagen for ISPOR Europe in November 2019. So we mostly talk of ecosystems in the context of setting up digital innovation platforms or fostering cross-silo integrated care or collaboration, or building ecosystems of connected technologies. But today I want to show you the real power of ecosystems as a philosophy, as a way of thinking, even a sort of science of studying health and disease, and especially one that's concerned with discovering and understanding differences in experience, differences in individual and social capacities for creating health or managing disease, and also of finding novel possibilities and then designing or co-creating health ecosystem value. So for the past few years, I've been dedicated to creating and deploying an entire system of thinking using an ecosystem or ecological perspective on health and disease. And I call this system of thinking, this framework, health ecosystem value design. And it consists of 5 components that together help us to see those differences in real experiences with health or disease, frame individual health ecosystems for inquiry, understand their functioning elements and the mechanisms, identify a universal structure to understand what's going on inside an individual framed health ecosystem, and then finally to discover novel possibilities and design that health ecosystem value. So I shall give a very brief introduction to each of these core concepts that make up the framework. So first, to see and think ecosystemically is to look for and explain differences in real experiences with disease. It's to identify particularly and understand the interactions or encounters, the mechanisms and the processes that create, sustain and can change experiences with health and disease. Interactions not just in the body, but beyond the body. People's encounters or interactions with their environment, with other people, in their communities, with organizations, with agents of healthcare too, as well as of course with products and technologies, and also in the places and spaces in which we live. Ecosystem thinking is especially concerned with understanding the forces that those encounters or interactions contain, forces such as these from our study into obesity. And it's also concerned then with the relation of individual affects or individual mind and body states that these forces produce over a duration. So the foundation of an ecosystem philosophy of health is a view of health disease experience as embodied, as produced in our dynamic encounters with the world. And so I created a model of these dynamics, what I call an assemblage of health experience. And using it, we can identify and explain those encounters, the forces and their affects that give rise to different experiences with health, not just of individuals or of patients, but of different experiences, intensities, and atmospheres of experience in families, in communities, in work, even in professional care and other service settings, as well as throughout an entire ecosystem. Now, there's a lot to this model that I can't explain in this short talk, and a full annotated version is, however, available to download from the Umio website. So with a new systemic model of experience with health disease defined, next we need to put it to use. We need to define or frame an individual health ecosystem for inquiry. Now, any health ecosystem has untapped capacity for doing more, for mitigating outside or external forces, for creating positive affects, and for overcoming negative experiences with health or disease. A potential capacity that really defines the scope of an ecosystem's potential powers of acting in its particular context. What I call its affective capacity, the capacity to affect positively experiences with health in life. And our goal is simply to discover the means to enact and sustain that capacity. Thus, I define a health ecosystem as a structure defining a space of possibilities, a space bounded or framed by certain contexts. And these contexts can be a mix of the following, as shown: a health or disease event or state, a population or group, including maybe a minority group, a geography based on a community, a place, or even a care setting, a type of care setting. A beneficiary actor is very important. And these are the group of persons who share a similar experience with health, disease, an event or state, and they form often the core of our inquiry. And there's always a purpose that sets the direction, the trajectory of value creation. Okay, so I use this V frame to indicate value and place the assemblage model of health at the base. And here are some example frames of health ecosystems for studies that we've completed or are currently undertaking. Okay, next, with the health ecosystem framed, we need to know how they function. We need to decide on an arrangement that helps us to see through their complexity to reveal possibility. And the arrangement I use is that of the practice. Practices of both co-creation of health as well as often its co-destruction. So this model shows the primary elements and mechanisms forming an individual practice. And obvious practices in healthcare are those to diagnose, to screen, to treat, to prevent, to monitor or measure a particular condition. And in people's experience with health or disease, it may be to self-assess, to determine if something is wrong, to self-manage. And at the social level, practices may be to organise, to collaborate, to share knowledge, to measure impact of actions, and to obtain funding. Now, every framed ecosystem contains multiple practices of interaction. And so to see inside and study an ecosystem of practices within a frame, we need to define a structure, the fourth component of health ecosystem value design. Now, for any health ecosystem, there's the same internal structure, consisting of 8 levels with 4 levels of agency. Each level consists of practices of a certain mix of actors, of interactions, of roles or agency. And these are, very briefly, interactions within the body at level 1, interactions and encounters by an individual person at level 2, familial or intimate encounters of the self, that person, at level 3 with close friends, obviously with family, interactions of the self in the community, in social interactions at level 4. And then there are 4 levels of professional or service or role-based health encounters. One-to-one encounters between individuals and professional healthcare or service agents at levels 5. Interactions between individuals and groups or teams at level 6. Interactions within teams and organizations at level 7. And then at the highest level, interactions between organizations, that's at level 8. And overseeing the ecosystem are one or more organizations in governance roles, be they regulators, policymakers, funders, standards, guideline setters. And beneath the 8 levels are underlying structures that contain those deeper, sometimes hidden forces, the mechanisms and processes of how the ecosystem functions. Structures such as what we believe, what knowledge we deem to be useful and how we acquire it, how we think about and assess value, of course, and also those routines of practice that can form habits. And using this structure, we now have all the elements we need to map and explore a framed health ecosystem and to understand differences in experience, capacities, and also patterns of the emergence of value. For example, in these studies, the emergence of differentiated self-management capacities at levels 2 or 3 in an ecosystem, and the study of their impact on and the potential for integration in care practices in levels 5 and 6. And we've been studying this particular dynamic in our work on chronic pain in Europe. In this example, exploring how new therapies based on underlying process-based disease pathologies and taxonomy might disrupt existing practices at levels 5, 6, and 7 that use traditional organ and speciality-based treatment approaches, such as in inflammatory diseases like rheumatoid arthritis. And in this third example, the discovery of distinct assemblages of individual weight loss capacities, those of diabetic obese persons at levels 2 and 3. And how understanding these differences in experience can inform the design and funding of more tailored social actions to tackle forces and causes of obesity in communities at level 4, or on behalf of a pharmaceutical company, a payer value case for a weight loss drug in the context, all the dynamics, the changes, the drivers and enablers within an obesity ecosystem. So the one thing these studies have in common is that they're all studies of the emergence of capacities and of possible value in a health ecosystem. Emergence that's a function of the rate and nature of dynamic changes in the relation of structure, practice, adaptation, capacity, and enablers, up, down, between, and within the 8 levels. And they're all enabled by studies that reveal those differences, those diverse assemblages of experiences with health within a particular frame. So with insights captured, and then using a model of ecosystem value evolution, here's showing the different phase or value states that any health ecosystem passes through to realize transformation, we can now design ecosystem strategy and co-create a matrix of transformational concepts and propositions, whether multiple product, multiple service, technology, digital program, policy, or understand the access and implementation challenges we need to overcome to realize health ecosystem value. A multi-level, multi-design, multi-method strategy for discovering and accelerating health ecosystem value. So to conclude this rapid introduction, ecosystem thinking for me is not just about the creation of innovation platforms, of enabling integration or boosting collaboration. Nor do I limit health ecosystems to disease, cure, and care practices. Just a way to organize care and to support patients to manage, stabilize, or recover to a norm or an expected baseline of physiological and well-being functioning. Rather, ecosystem thinking provides the means to identify and enact the enablers and capacities, not just for patients and healthcare actors, but for families, communities, and populations, to go above the merely functioning baseline, to expand an ecosystem's scope for creating health to the limits of its potential capacities. Thus, in an ecosystem view, I define value as the realization of affective capacity, which is a very different view of value to the common sort of standard of thinking of outcomes over cost. An unrealized value that grows as we extend ecosystem thinking from acute and chronic care services to community, to population health, and ultimately to ecological health, the health of our planet. And so whatever project you're working on, you can adopt an ecosystem perspective now. You can learn to think, see, and act in an ecosystem way today. Because when you do, you can see more, you can explain more, and you can discover new capacities for creating greater, more positive, sustained impact on health in people's lives. So I'll leave you with these key lessons that I've identified and working within an ecosystem perspective. And please feel free to get in touch if you've got any questions or would like to learn more about health ecosystem value design. Thank you.